Ready? I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Bogota Board of Education for Tuesday, February 28th into order. Please stand for the flag salute. The New Jersey Open Publics Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Bogota Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Bogota Borough Hall, communicated by letter to the record, filed with the clerk of the Borough of Bogota, and posted on the Bogota Board of Education website. Mr. Irfan,
Mrs. Alvarez,
Present.
Mr. Alvarez,
present.
Mr. Chavez,
Present.
Mrs. Cruz,
Present.
Mr. Navarro,
Present.
Mrs. Olivo,
Present.
Mr. Ortega,
Present.
Mrs. Rocket, absent, Mr. Miranda.
Present.
We have the quorum.
For the record, Mrs. Rocket is a bit delayed. Also present is Superintendent Damian Kennedy, Board Attorney William Sukis, Business Administrator and Board Secretary Irfan Efsil, and Assistant Board Secretary Elizabeth Ruiz. And we do not have a student representative tonight. I'd like to open the floor, hearing of citizens on agenda items only. Do I have a motion to open the floor? Motion.
Second.
Okay, that was Chavez Navarro, correct? Thank you. Any board discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, any citizen or member, stakeholder, or any resident who would like to speak up on agenda items only, you have 5 minutes. State your name and address. Do we have any member of the public? Mr. Kennedy, do we have anyone online?
No.
I'll take a motion to close hearing on citizens on agenda items only.
Motion Olivo.
Thank you, Mrs. Olivo. Do I have a second?
Alvarez.
Mr. Alvarez, thank you very much. Any board discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Moving on to section 3.1 of our agenda, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, first, I have added an addendum to the agenda tonight. I was able to find a graphic arts teacher who can start right away. So once she is fingerprinted and cleared, she will be able to start. Also, with the new HIB policy, I have to report out, we had one confirmed case this month. The new policy requires the superintendent to report our cases at each board meeting moving forward. After tonight's meeting, you will get an update on the case, but without specific names and anything that would be considered confidential. And then at the next meeting, we will put that on the agenda and you will vote on it. So just be aware of that moving forward. Great job by our building and grounds crew today, led by Mr. Cano. They were out early, removed all the snow, and had everything ready to open schools today with no problems. High school sports update. We had 2 wrestlers qualify for Atlantic City. They are Richfield Park students, but with the co-op, they're still considered Bogota. So congratulations to Teresa Zeppatelli and Derek Rodriguez. Teresa is in the state finals for girls, and Derek is in the top, I think, 16 wrestlers make it in each weight class. So good luck to them. Also this year, with our indoor track club, we had a Group 1 section champion in Amadine Fernandez. She almost won the state championship. She really missed it by a split second, but she did advance to the meet of champions, and she will run this weekend. Referendum update. We are 14 days away from the March 14th referendum vote. Obviously, a mailer went out this weekend with another district's information. This was a clerical error by our architect. Our mailer will be hitting homes in Bogota this week. Unfortunately, it was a human error. I have made sure to let the architects know that we are not happy with this. We want to give out precise information, and if anyone looks at it casually and sees a different number or sees different things on it, they might understand that. Also, our last town hall meeting is scheduled for March 9th at 7 PM right here in the cafeteria. That meeting will be in person and virtual. One important thing regarding March 14th, I have requested a virtual school day from the county. That is part of the new, if your buildings have elections in their building, because this is a school election, it's not automatically considered. I have not heard back I have heard back. He's waiting to hear from Trenton. I will be closing schools if I do not get that virtual day. I need to have our buildings cleared. We don't want the buildings open and anyone walking through. Two of our buildings are polling places. Also for parking, I don't want to give any excuses out to anyone if they want to get out and vote. So we will be closed or we will be virtual. So I hopefully will have a decision within the next day or two. And then lastly, check out our website, social media. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I feel we provide a lot of information. I'm receiving a lot of positive feedback. My only ask is that you get out and vote that day. We continue to tell people you could be for it, but if you're for it, please get out and vote. Polling places will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. District 1 and 6 at the rec center, districts 2 and 3 at the high school, and districts 4 and 5 at Bixby School. Also, if you are registered to receive mail-in ballots, you should receive them. If not already, they will be there within the next day or two. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I also like to acknowledge the most important student representative, Simra Fatima. Welcome. Moving on to resolution 4.3, approval of minutes of the January 3rd, 2023 reorganization meeting and January 17th, regular meeting, open sessions. Do I have a motion to approve resolution 4.3?
Motion Olivo.
Mrs. Olivo, do I have a second?
Second Dario.
Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez. Any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
I would like to abstain as I was absent.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Moving on to policy portion of the agenda tonight. It's item 5.3, the approval of agenda items 5.1 and 5.2. Do I have a motion to approve 5.3? Motion, Chavez. Mr. Chavez, do I have a second?
Second, John.
Mr. Ortega, thank you very much. Any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Irfan. Moving on to section of the education portion of the agenda, resolution 6.10, approval of agenda items 6.1 through 6.9. Do I have a motion to approve 6.10? Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez, do I have a second?
Navarro.
Mr. Navarro, thank you very much. Any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
On to resolution 6.14, which is approval for item 6.11 through 6.13. Do I have a motion to approve 6.14? Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez, do I have a second?
Olivo.
Mrs. Olivo, thank you very much. Any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Moving on to personnel portion of the agenda, 7.7, approval of agenda items 7.1 through 7.6. Do I have a motion to approve 7.7?
Motion Olivo.
Mrs. Olivo, do I have a second? Chavez. Mr. Chavez, any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
On to items 7.16 for the approval of agenda items 7.7 through 7.15. Is there a motion to approve resolution 7.16?
Alvarez.
Mr. Alvarez, do I have a second?
Navarro.
Mr. Ortega, that was you? Thank you. Any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to the finance portion of the agenda, resolution 8.12, approval of consent agenda items 8.1 through 8.11. Is there a motion to approve 8.12?
Navarro.
Mr. Navarro, do I have a second? Mr. Chavez, any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
On to 8.18, approval of agenda items 8.13 through 8.17. Do I have a motion to approve 8.18? Motion, Chavez. Mr. Chavez, do I have a second?
Olivo.
Mrs. Olivo, any board discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Moving on to building and grounds on the agenda, resolution 8.1 of the application for use of school property. Do I have a motion to approve 8.1?
Motion Olivo.
9.1. I'm sorry, 9.1. Approval of application to use for use of school property. Do I have a motion to approve 9.1?
Alvarez.
Mr. Alvarez, do I have a second?
Olivo.
Mrs. Olivo, any board discussion? I'm sorry, roll call, Mr. Irfan.
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
At this portion, we're gonna add an addendum to our agenda, which will be 10.1, moving all others below. Approval of graphic arts teacher. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the board approves Natalia Kaddish as a graphic art teacher at the junior senior high school at a salary of the BA step 9, 60 up to 62,100, start date pending criminal history approval through June 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve 10.1?
Navarro.
Mr. Navarro, do I have a second? Alvarez. Mrs. Alvarez. Any discussion? Mr. Irfan?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Navarro,
Yes.
Mrs. Olivo,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Moving on to section, is it? Yeah, so it's 11.1. Next is the committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Oh, hi, I apologize.
All I had to say was that for the arts department, our concert and jazz bands have been working hard for our first spring concert that will be held on May 19th. We'll also be performing at the concert in the Parks Festival at Dorney Park on May 26th. Our drama club and production are also working extra hard for their upcoming spring musical, The Addams Family. Be sure to come and support our performances on March 24th and 25th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. Okay, moving on to section, oh, sorry, any committee reports? All right, moving on to section 12.1. Next on the agenda is old business, which is 12.1. Is there any old business the board would like to discuss? All right. All right, moving on to section 13.1. Next on the agenda is new business as items 13.1. Is there any new business the board would like to discuss? Moving on is 14.1. Hearing of the public. Is there a motion to open the floor to hearings of the public?
Alvarez.
Mr. Alvarez, do I have a second?
Navarro.
Mr. Chavez, is there any board discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there any member of the public who would like to address the board? Speakers, please state your name and address. You have 5 minutes. Any member of the public? Yes.
First of all, I was on the board at the one time. Because we went for,
Use your microphone, please.
there's nothing.
Right.
Oh.
There you go.
Does it work?
Yeah.
It does. First of all, I want to, thank you always for your service because it is a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I truly respect it enormously. I want to introduce myself. I'm not sure. I think I pretty much know everyone. I am this year's appointed liaison to the Board of Education. I am almost 40 years teaching and spent many years up here. So I certainly advocate tremendously for the education and the children. Having said that, there's a tiny conflict in terms of I'm also planning and zoning, and both, Mr. Miranda and Mr. Chavez ran into that complication. So if I'm not here, respectfully, I might need to be at planning and zoning, but I will always keep in touch with Mr. Kennedy and certainly Mr. Miranda, or anyone, once myself, if you need something that you would like me to report out. So again, I just wanted to introduce. I have a quick question to Mr. Kennedy in regards to the school possible closure for the 14th, which I personally love because we don't do that there. Again, guys, for those that don't know me, Robert grew up with my kids. So I know that with trying to figure out the logistics of taking care of the kids, or if, you were to be closed, do you have maybe a last date in which you will be able to notify the parents of whatever that, if they don't get back to you, because we know the state is slow?
Yes, I was hoping by tomorrow or Thursday, the latest, to get the word out. I emailed and I spoke to the county soup. He's waiting from Trenton, so if we can't do it, then it'll be before the end of this week that the word is out.
Okay, thanks, because again, people try to then get themselves set up for what they're gonna have to do. Thank you very much, and again, thank you for all your service.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Anyone else? Do we have any member of?
Hello, Lisa Coles, 385 River Road. Just a quick question. 8.15 approval of the contract for the recreation, Bixby resurfacing. So if the referendum passes, I know Bixby's adding, will that go away, or is that still gonna be part of it?
At the end of the day, I look at the playgrounds as community playgrounds, just like the one at Steen. It'll be a place for the parents to take their kids on the weekend, so playground will be open to the public. So whether there's older kids in the building or younger kids, the playground will be available.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have anybody? Quick opinion, we're either gonna be virtual or school's gonna close. So why don't we call that you will not be in school? This way people prep, because you're gonna have a babysitter or someone, or take the day off or stay at home, whether it's A or B. So we might as well make it very clear that they will not be in the building.
So as of right now, it is a single session day, so that's already on the calendar. The question arises if we are virtual. I don't know if they allow me to close all the buildings. They might only allow me to go virtual in the 2 buildings that have polling places. So I was kind of hold off until I could just say, because if we're closed, we're closed. But I think by the end of the day tomorrow, I will get word out that on the 14th, students will not be in the building, whether that is virtual or whether that's a day off. That's where it will be.
That's to be determined.
If it
So-
becomes a virtual day, is it still a half a day?
Yes,
So, and I think Steen is the only one that would
and the middle
keeps us in
school.
the
Middle
balance,
school.
and the middle school. Okay, true. Okay, and thank you for your time. No, just making sure I didn't lose my. All the number changes. So, may I have a motion to close public hearing?
Motion Ortega.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Do I have a second?
Second, Cruz?
Mrs. Cruz, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to section 15.1. Now on to executive session. I understand that we do have?
Yeah.
Okay. Personnel and litigation matters to be discussed. I need the. Go back to my agenda here. You have it? Whereas C.231 PL 1975, also known as the Sunshine Law, authorizes a public body to meet in executive or private session under certain limited circumstances, and whereas the said law requires the board to adopt a resolution at a public meeting before it can meet in such an executive or private session. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Bogota Board of Education that it does hereby determine that it is necessary to meet in executive session on February 28th, 2023, at approximately 7:25 PM to discuss matters involving negotiations, litigation, and personnel. That the matter discussed will be made public when confidentiality is no longer required, and action pursuant to said discussion shall take place only at a public meeting. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
Motion, Chavez?
Mr. Chavez, do I have a second?
Olivo?
Mr. Olivo, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. What do we say, about 15 minutes? 5 minutes. Can I have a motion to open public meeting
Motion.
back into order? Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Olivo, do I have a second? Mr. Chavez, all in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone.